welcome.
Highlight for us your dilemma, because you had a lot of tremors in that region in January. There were warnings. Your civil protection agency met 7 days beforehand and issued a statement saying the tremors being felt by the population are part of a typical sequence.
Precisely.
3 months on, in retrospect, do you think you were not cautious enough?
I tell you the situation. We called after the earthquake, the 6th April earthquake, an international commission. Among those, there were also a scientist from California, Professor Jordan, who said, Guido, we have had exactly the same situation in California. For 3 months, we have had earthquakes, very small, and we didn't know what to do, because we were even unable to predict and so to put in action real things in order to what to do, evacuate people. With earthquakes, you cannot do anything, even though you, for 3 months, 5 months, you may have some seismic activities.
Guido, do you think you would now decide to reduce the risk by being far more cautious and being far darker about the warnings if you had that sequence of tremors that you saw earlier this year?
We can only, as I said, try to spread information among the people and explain them even better than before what to do and how to behave in case there is an earthquake. Moreover, of course, we are doing a very important study on the vulnerability of the buildings. But when you have 60% of your countryside, even for L'Aquila, 2 provinces with the situation for 3 months, you need to go and check exactly the different buildings. So it's a very long exercise, but as far as I know, worldwide today cannot be done anything more than what we have done in the situation of L'Aquila.
Do you agree?
I totally agree, but I'd just like to add one little point. I mean, this idea of pre-planning in advance and the comparison between one earthquake zone and another. Prior to the Kobe earthquake, there was a plan in place.
That was in Japan.
Yes. The Japanese government has spent a lot of money pre-planning how they would respond. And one of the responses, if they got a series of tremors, was somehow to try to arrange an evacuation. Had they had those warnings and they had that evacuation in place, they would have increased the kill rate enormously, because the epicenter was the main motorway leaving Kobe. So they would have in effect just put people onto the epicenter of the earthquake. So sometimes the plan doesn't fit the scenario.
Well, there are actually also limits to government action. Take the Sichuan earthquake in China recently. The crack, the fault, was 300 kilometers long, 46 million people affected, with 417 cities. What can you do about it? Nothing very much. You can keep warning, but you can't evacuate 46 million people. Firstly, you don't even know where that crack is going to come into. So there are limits to government action, which is why I go back to what I say. Risk reduction is very good and it's useful, but it shouldn't stop at the point of disaster.
Loren Legarda, do you accept that?
Yes, actually it's not one or the other. We don't even have to disagree, because while response and rehabilitation are important, minimizing the risk, it's very clear. We know exactly what to do. And it is actually everybody's business. As the Bangladesh experience would show, it is, yes, community participation, IEC, information, education, communication. School children must be taught what to do in the event of an earthquake. Contractors, builders must know what kind of structures to build. Local governments must be able to be empowered and made accountable for what happens in the respective towns and cities and provinces. National governments must be able to provide the funding needed to be able to build good infrastructure, bridges and roads. And I believe that good governance is at the core and essence of this, because if there is corruption, the resources, the money that should have gone towards building the right kind of bridges, the right kind of infrastructure, if it went to corruption, will actually lead to structures which could cause tragedies and disasters when natural hazards hit the place. So it is an international, national, a local government, and a community of participation all rolled into one. Not one sector could be responsible for response, rehabilitation, and preparedness for disasters.
Edward Borodzic, you're a professor in a business school and a professor of risk and crisis management. How much is business now seized of this? Because if businesses are suffering and their economic fortunes are suffering, how much is that becoming a play in this dynamic, not just human loss?
It's a two-pronged. Big businesses are extremely well fortified and protected. They know it affects their their bottom line.
Including in the developing world?
Well, big businesses are all over the world. They tend to be multinational.
What about the smaller businesses?
The smaller businesses,
ones that countries depend on.
The smaller businesses is a very different story. You talk to most small businesses and you say, what are the chief risks for you? And they say, staying in business till next week.
And that's their risk.
Yes, and that's where we really need to concentrate resilience. They are the big employers in society. This is the bottom up that we require. We need to do more at the bottom end.
Arjun, what about the challenge that if money is going to be put into risk reduction, it's money that's coming from somewhere else, particularly during this financial downturn where every government is losing on tax take. In other words, there's simply going to be less money. It's a risk reduction for disasters versus the Millennium Development Goals, poverty, and so on.
I don't think it's versus. It should be with. And also, the question you posed is so different depending on the budgets and the locations and the places. Developing countries obviously have huge interests in poverty eradication, health, education, things of that sort. So if they're not in such risk-prone areas, obviously they'll devote more resources to that. But if they themselves, like Bangladesh, are in risk-prone areas, then definitely they should allocate money towards risk reduction. But, it's competing priorities and there's nothing you can do about that.
Guido, finally, you will return from here in Geneva, not far away, to just east of Rome, to L'Aquila.
An hour flight.
It's an hour's flight from here. But if we were to talk to you in a year or two, do you believe that you will be able to tell us that there is a different change, there's a different mindset? Memories tend to be rather short.
I agree with you. Memory is very short, but this time memory will last, I'm sure. We have been able to learn a lot of lessons, not only from the last earthquake, but in the 2002 we had a small earthquake in Molise, a small region in Italy, where a school collapsed. And 27 children and their teacher, they died. After that, we started to reorganize the civil protection, we started to reorganize the mapping of the seismic area in Italy, and we started to write new laws in order to build safely where there is a risk of earthquake. After this lesson in L'Aquila, we will continue with this kind of activity in order to improve prevention and information. I'm more than sure in 2 years you will be able to check and judge.
Guido Bertolaso, thank you very much indeed, and all of you, thank you very much indeed. I asked the question at the beginning, disasters, do we prepare or just react? We've shown there's a mood to prepare, but the reality tends to be still reaction. From here at the BBC World Debate in Geneva, thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.